Fortin, Vice President of Government Relations for CAI, and I'm talking to you today about the government's Qualified Residential Mortgage Regulation. As you know, in response to the housing crisis, the federal government has begun the process of restructuring the regulations and laws that govern the mortgage finance system. What this means is that the rules that determine who gets a mortgage, for what type of property, in what type of community, will be dramatically changing during the course of 2011. These changes are taking place in 4 major policy areas. These are the FHA condo regulations, the FHFA private transfer fee rule, the Qualified Residential Mortgage Regulations, and GSE reform. This presentation focuses on the Qualified Residential Mortgage Regulations and how they will impact CAI members. For more information on the other topics, please visit CAI's Mortgage Matters page. A link is provided at the end of this presentation. Long story short, in an effort to reduce the risk banks take in lending, Congress included a provision on mortgage lending in the Wall Street Reform Act that passed in 2010. This provision requires that a mortgage must meet the requirements of a qualified residential mortgage. If it does not, the bank that issues the mortgage has to retain an ownership interest in the mortgage it issues. Because retaining an ownership in a mortgage would be costly for banks, it is anticipated that most banks will adhere to the requirements under the Qualified Residential Mortgage. So what Qualified Residential Mortgage Regulations will do will likely affect all mortgages issued when the rule becomes final at some future date. QRM will be a set of standards for mortgage products and lending that will govern mortgage markets for the next generation of homebuyers. The definition of QRM was developed by a cadre of federal agencies that include the Federal Reserve, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Housing Administration, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the FHFA, the FDIC, and the Treasury. Scared yet? CAI's concern is that the 2 participants in this process, the FHA and the FHFA, have already weighed in with regulations that have had a negative impact on community associations. Of further concern is that the new standards for mortgages will be set so high that few buyers will be able to meet the new qualifications. As we shall see, the new requirements as proposed are very stringent. So let's take a look at what these criteria are and what they include. Unlike the FHA condo regulations or the FHA private transfer fee rule, the QRM regulations do not specifically target community associations. Rather, they address criteria to be used to qualify all borrowers for mortgage products in the future. It will have a broad impact on the entire housing market as a result. Specifically, as lending requirements tighten, the pool of potential buyers will likely shrink, and no one would argue that with the past decade of easy lending, that changing these requirements is not needed. But the question before policymakers is, what are the best criteria to use for the new standard for mortgages? Here's what the government thinks the new standard should be in their initial proposal. First, a 20% down payment will be required. No longer will borrowers be able to take 80-15-5 or 80-20 mortgages where the down payment is financed through a separate loan. All closing costs and fees cannot be financed in the mortgage itself. Loan-to-value ratios cannot exceed 80% of the property value, and for refinancing, only 75% of the loan or the property value can be taken out as a loan. If a buyer is refinancing and taking cash out of their equity, then the final loan will have to be 70% of the value of the property itself. The good news is that the payment a borrower has to make on their home is limited to a percentage of their gross income, around 28%. The good news is that this percentage now includes mandatory payments associated with that property, like taxes, or more importantly, community association assessments. That policy change will definitely benefit members of CAI. Additionally, a borrower may not be more than 30 days late or 30 days delinquent in whole or in part on any debt obligation. A borrower will have to be no more than 60 days delinquent in whole or in part on any debt obligation for the prior 2 years or 24 months. The buyer cannot have had property repossessed within the last 36 months. And a buyer may not have been party to a bankruptcy proceeding within the prior 36 months. Additionally, the borrower may not have been party to a foreclosure, short sale, or deed in lieu of foreclosure within the last 36 months, nor could they have been subject to a state or federal judgment for collection of any unpaid debt within the last 36 months. The impact at this stage is difficult to assess, but some assumptions seem clear at this stage of the process. First, the Mortgage Bankers Association looked at the mortgage data from 2010 to find out how many mortgages issued in that year would meet the requirements of the proposal issued by the federal government. Does anybody want to guess the percentage of mortgages that would meet the new standard? The answer is surprisingly only 30% of borrowers in 2010 would meet the requirements of QRM as drafted. The other issue is that those who don't meet the qualified residential mortgage standards will have to pay a substantially higher rate for mortgages if they can find a mortgage product at all. Clearly, this will greatly slow an already depressed housing market, which leaves the big question for policymakers is to decide whether the current QRM levels are adequate or do they need to be changed to affect higher borrowing benchmarks and result in fewer buyers for a short period of time, or set them lower to result in more buyers, although having weaker standards. The net effect will depend on where the final criteria are set, a process that will be shaped by input from numerous organizations, including CAI. So what is CAI doing on this matter? CAI is working with our members to respond to the QRM draft regulation. We plan on submitting a comprehensive set of comments on how this proposal will impact our members. This will include a survey open for members for a limited period of time, which we will post to the Mortgage Matters website. As always, we'll keep you updated on our Mortgage Matters website and through our various chapters and publications. For more information on CI's Mortgage Matters program, you can check out our website at cimortgagematters.org. It has info on FHA, FHFA, QRM, and other issues of importance at the federal level that can affect your community in the months and years ahead. It includes a free webinar on housing policy changes, including the one we're talking about right now, and has a blog on important policy updates. We hope you find this useful, and thanks for tuning in.